Good morning to all those that are joining us today. This is another, we call it the Spill the Tea session. This is Dr. Pete and T. Tanner will not be with us today because she's not feeling well, although she may jump in at some point during the session. We are live on Facebook and on YouTube, and we are also going to be live in Clubhouse in about 1 second here. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and open that room. So, good morning. This is Dr. Pete of Dr. Pete and Tea. This is another session of Spill the Tea. And we are here today. This is our 4th session, and we're doing this in the style of a master class to spend about 20 minutes talking about the subject at hand, and then opening up the Clubhouse room and the YouTube and the Facebook channel to questions. We hope for a vigorous discussion. And today's topic, today we segue from talking about the epidemic of sugar in our culture, which then segued to the amount of unrefined carbohydrates and refined carbohydrates and sugars that people actually have unknowingly in their diet, and how an understanding of that matters, because if we want to shift to the keto lifestyle for whatever reason that we have, and there can be compelling reasons for this, right, that I'll cover in a second, that grappling with the amount of carbs that are in our life matters, because that is one of the things that has to be rectified, right? If we start down the keto lifestyle and we're still eating in the same habitual manner that we were beforehand, and we're still introducing carbohydrates, however subtle, into our lives, then that's going to be a problem with maintaining the lifestyle and overcoming any particular types of metabolic ailments that we may have. All right. Now, because I'm live on YouTube and Facebook and Clubhouse, and I'm running this by myself, I'm going to have to segue back and forth. So I would ask right now in Clubhouse if either Nathan or Peter want to come up on stage. You guys don't have to, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but I'm asking because I'm about to launch into basically the meat or the master class part of this. Good morning, Nathan. Thanks for coming up.
Yeah, no problem, Dr. Pete. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll be up here if you need any help.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So let's talk about the meat of this. So we spent 3 sessions talking about sugar, and I know that I had some listeners asking, all right, why are you focusing only on sugar? There are other, there's this other aspect of when we go into the keto lifestyle, we have to limit carbohydrates, and I'm going to talk about what those limits ought to be today. But I've identified in my own practice over the last couple of years that carb addiction is really a big deal. This makes the difference whether or not an individual is actually going to be successful living the keto lifestyle or not, literally. All right, because with carb addiction, the problem is that these individuals have a tendency to go back to eating that way, and as soon as they do, it throws them out of the lifestyle, and being able to reverse things like diabetes, prediabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular disease goes to the wayside. There's no 2 ways about it. So if you happen to be one of the 52% of the individuals in the US who are my age, I'm 63, just turned 63 a few weeks ago, and you have the flip of a coin chance of either being diabetic, you may overlap with some of the other chronic diseases like obesity with health concerns and or the cardiovascular platform, the cardiovascular disease aspect of this, or maybe even you're a gout sufferer like I am. or in one sense was, all right, and I'll try to come back to this sort of a comment, then one option you have for reversing those conditions is to shift to the keto lifestyle. And there's plenty of hardcore science now that have been done on individuals with the findings. Virta Health maybe is the gold standard for this, that shows that these conditions can in fact be reversed. But the big issue that faces anyone who's thinking about this is getting into the lifestyle and then staying there. And I've identified the issue of eating the refined carbohydrates and the sugars to start with, and how those permeate our existence is going to be one of the big hurdles that someone who wants to do this is going to have to get over, right? Because you can't be successful in this lifestyle if you go back to eating those kinds of foods. So if you're thinking about the keto lifestyle, the first thing that you need to consider before you jump into this, and I can't overemphasize this, I got an email yesterday from somebody who and the email was quite long, and it went through and literally listed one metabolic condition that they were challenged with after another. And then, there was all this energy in the email, and really the whole point was I want to start keto, and I want to start it right now. So I totally understand how that individual feels, because I felt that way, right? I recovered from prediabetes, and I did it rapidly in terms of A1C and my fasting glucose. There are other biomarkers that took longer, and I don't want to get off track right now, but I know exactly how it feels to have gotten the email, okay, you are yada yada, and then the recommendation coming from the medical establishment, which is more or less eat the Mediterranean diet and get more exercise. And when I got that email, I was a fifth-year CrossFit athlete and in the gym 5 days a week. And I'm sitting here going, what? What is this business about the exercise? And my doctor knew that I was a CrossFit athlete. It's like, oh my God. All right. So I know exactly how that person feels. But here's the thing. I think, so let me just say this in advance. I think this lifestyle is not that hard to do. All right. That's how I feel about it. But on the other side of that coin, it is hard to do. And what do I mean by that? I mean that one needs to think about these issues. First, honestly, delving into just how ingrained carbohydrates are in your life before you even start thinking about how to do the lifestyle, how to do the diet, right? How to change the eating pattern. First is sitting back and going, all right, where am I at on this carbohydrate thing? How often am I eating over the course of a day? And what am I eating exactly? Am I hitting the break room for the bagels? Am I having the after dinner chocolate bar? This is what I used to do that had a ton of sugar in it right before I went to sleep. What are my eating habits? Because understanding those will allow you to more objectively understand what you're going to need to change, right? And then once you have made the decision on that, you need to think about, okay, where's my support going to come from this? Because if you're in a family, for example, and you're the only one who's planning on eating keto, and you've got a spouse and there are kids and things like that, this could be very, very difficult, especially if the spouse is not on board at all, right? If the spouse is going, this is just woo-woo stuff, right? And when I say this, I'm not being flippant about it. I have friends, right, that are in this category. And I have clients who are in this category where the family is not on board with keto for one reason or the other. I have one friend that I am now convinced is a woo-woo thing. They think it's a woo-woo thing that I'm doing. And every single time we get together, I have to listen to this quiet voice just coming on me. Most recently suggesting to me that I should be at least willing to go out and be happy, right? Well, what the hell does that mean, right? I am happy. I have a good time on this lifestyle. It's an adventure. Have I had to learn, new ways of cooking? Have I had to learn a new way of eating? Have I had to learn about the challenges of a restaurant, right? Because honestly, we're trying to do this in a world of carboholics. And I mean that in the most serious way I can say it, right? We're in a culture of carboholics. And trying to rectify that is second to not admitting about how many carbs are in our life going into this, right? And thinking about that objectively, then the next thing is going to be the social thing. And having a family that's not on board with it, or your closest friends who think that you're out to lunch. You got to consider this stuff. And support networks are going to be super important. That's one of the things that I find about Clubhouse that's super cool, right? We have the Keto Diet Club, we have Keto for the Soul, and then there's a myriad of others that have recently come up. And there's a ton of places that you can find support. And if you watch the Clubhouse announcements over the course of today, you're going to see opportunities for this coming up all day long. This is a great place to get it because you can come right into a room. And there's a bunch of people like myself, as an example, who have been doing this a while and have already lived through these challenges and still are being challenged, right? I'm coming off a weekend where I was directly challenged about my lifestyle from a close friend, and that's really hard to take, and I'm not over it yet. I'm still trying to sort the deal out. The next thing that needs to happen if you're seriously going to do this lifestyle, besides going, okay, this is what I'm eating, I got to own up to it, right? I need a support network. Where am I going to find it? And that this next point is that you got to clean the house out. The pantry's got to get cleaned out, and the refrigerator, because there's going to be things in there that you literally can't eat. And in the interest today of not going on too long, right, I have a lot of things to cover here quickly before we get to our discussion. Things like ketchup, that came right into my mind in a refrigerator, and that's loaded with high fructose corn syrup. Man, you can't eat that, right? It's got to go. Now, how do you do this in a family where you don't have the support? And I don't necessarily have the best answer for that. I know in my house, all right, my wife still likes to eat certain carbohydrate items. And in our pantry, she has her shelf and I have my shelf. And it's workable for me. I don't have an issue with that. I don't find myself in the middle of the night scrounging around on her shelf for something to eat out of there, a cookie or some darn thing like that. But then I'm also have been blessed with the fact that I don't have a carb addiction that is so extreme that could be a problem. So again, this goes back to my first point this morning, which is really understanding where you are on this continuum of carb addiction. Where are you? Is this a matter of are you on the left end, which I consider the easy end, where giving up these foods is really, it's not that big a deal? Or are you further out to the right on that continuum where giving up some of these foods is going to be really hard? Because if that's the thing, right, then the pantry actually really needs to be emptied out. And this is going to be something where you're going to really need this support. Because if that food is in the house, and again, I have experience with this through my clients, the chances that you're going to hammer that food is really good. It's just going to happen one night. You're going to be super hungry, perhaps super stressed out from the day, and that bag of chips is just going to be too compelling. And I don't know about any of you guys out there, but you get me going on a bag of chips, right? I don't stop with whatever their serving size is at 14 chips or whatever the heck it is. Man, the whole bag's going down. That's basically what's going to happen. So again, this is a matter of sorting out where you are with this thing and being realistic about it. And again, how compelling the reason is for you to be in this lifestyle. It matters, right? If you're a diabetic, you're obese or significantly overweight with the health concerns, and I keep qualifying that because there's there's a certain percentage of people who are overweight who are healthy metabolically, right? And if you're in that category, then you know, maybe you're just doing the lifestyle because you want to lose a few pounds, right? Differentiating that between someone who is like me, where, okay, I don't want to be a diabetic, and I don't want to go down the road into managed care or the amputations, the kidney disease, cardiovascular disease, and so on. I'm going to deal with this. I want to reverse it, because for people like us, this lifestyle is lifelong. It's not, we're not doing this for a few months and then, you know, coming back to whatever the way it is we ate before, because we know if we do that, if we go back to eating carbs, substantial carbs, that our condition, we're going to be revisiting our condition. All right. Now, I'm a lifelong teacher. And so when I started down the keto lifestyle, besides being inspired to help others, I've thought long and hard, how do I teach this to people? Because that's ultimately what I am. And so, I came up with this acronym called MAKESME Healthy. And if you look at how Virta Health does this, how they help their clients, their patients reverse diabetes, if you read Dr. Lustig, for example, his recent book, Metabolical, these guys all talk about the fact that that you need to monitor your biometrics. I mean, if you're doing the keto lifestyle, you should know whether or not you're actually in it. And their contention is that, especially when you go out on the internet, there's a lot of people that are claiming that they're doing the keto lifestyle who, in all probability, are actually not. All right. And so how do you know? Well, the 4 biomarkers that I monitor actually in myself every day are weight, my blood pressure, my fasting glucose, my ketones. And I also do uric acid. And as a keto coach, I also measure those biometrics several times a day. Every time I go to a new food, even now, less so now because I'm almost 3 years into this, basically 3 years, than I did in the early days. But still, when I do a new food sometimes and I'm curious, then I'm going to be measuring my biomarkers before that meal, and then literally a half an hour, hour, and 2 hours after that meal, in order to be able to see the effect of that food on my blood glucose and what it's doing to my ketones. And I can honestly look you guys in the face. I can't see you in Clubhouse, but I'm looking right now into my camera on YouTube and Facebook. And I can tell you that I have been ketosis for 3 years. I have not been out. And I've traveled around the world in this lifestyle. I've gone to, you know, endless restaurants and things like that. How do I know I've been in ketosis? Because I measure my ketones religiously. And I know that I haven't been below 0.5. Even when I was in Zimbabwe and eating served food in a camp, I still never was below 0.5. And in some cases, having to scrape sauces off the meat. I mean, so this lifestyle is definitely doable, but I think that if you have a compelling reason for being here, you should be monitoring your biometrics. I also look at other biometrics. I have 14 biomarkers that I measure between every 3 to 6 months, because even though there are published papers on this, and a lot of questions come up in these forums, you know, we're eating all this fat. Is this safe? Am I going to die of a heart attack? And bottom line is that all cardiovascular markers improve in this lifestyle. And that's based on the literature. But then I also have been measuring those biomarkers between every 3 to 6 months. And I know that in myself, and I'm stating this emphatically, that all my cardiovascular markers have improved in the keto lifestyle. How do I know? Because I measured them. All right. You also can do something very, very simple if you're not wanting to go have blood drawn. And I know this could sound woo-woo, but it's not. There's been some papers published in this area, and this is a strong marker. You can measure your waist circumference and then divide it by your height. And if that value is 0.5 or greater, then the likelihood that you're insulin resistant is actually quite high. And more than likely, if you measure the biomarkers I'm referring to, the 14, the fasting glucose A1C, your fasting insulin, C-peptide, HSCRP, total cholesterol, triglycerides, HDL, LDL, ApoB, ApoA1, uric acid, lipo, small a, and homocysteine, you're going to see a correlation or grouping of those factors in the area of insulin resistance. All right, now, to get to the last part of this, and then I'm going to open up everything to discussions, is that how do I advocate doing the lifestyle? So this is in our fourth session now. This is the meat, literally, no pun intended, of the session. So I believe in the three-way plate method. This is a method that I came up with myself, but I'm going to point out that as the gold standard, this is the way Virta Health does it too. So I don't count my macronutrients, and I don't want to get distracted right now off into a discussion about why I don't do that. The three-way plate is very, very simple. It is a plate that you've divided into 3 sections, and in one you're going to have a green listed vegetable. I'll list off some examples of those in a second. So in 2 of the segments, you're going to have green listed vegetables that are the size of a fist. All right. And then in the 3rd segment will be a piece of meat that will be the size of a man's wallet approximately, or a deck of cards. If you're athletic like I am, then the size of that meat or protein is going to be a little bit larger. And how you decide on the amount of protein that you need is going to be trial and error. I mean, there's some calculations. If there's some questions in Clubhouse, or if somebody chats me a question here, I can give you the formula. We can talk about that a little bit. But basically, you're going to have to play with that, around with that a little bit to see how you feel. And I am a CrossFit athlete and a rock climber. And right now we're moving into the climbing season, and I eat a little bit more protein, both because of my age and because of my recovery from that type of extreme exercise. All right. So choosing the amount of protein is it has to be a little bit variable. Combined with that plate is what I call the BAMO salad. And it's a loaded salad. It's got tons of dark green vegetables in it, along with other keto approved vegetables. And then with a fatty, non-commercial dressing. And I want to emphasize that because when in this lifestyle, you have to learn a new way of shopping, right? We want to stay out of the aisles. But one of the things that I think can be really problematic for the newbies is recognizing in the salad dressing aisle that you are actually seriously in trouble. The dressings, number one, are almost exclusively soybean oil. Even the ones who claim that they've got olive oil as their main thing in there, if you read the ingredient list, you're probably going to find vegetable oils spiked in there. So it's very hard. Even if you are at one of these chain markets that are supposedly super green, right, and super attentive to the keto needs, right? Even those, when you look in the dressing aisles, you're going to be hard pressed to find a salad dressing that isn't loaded with vegetable oils and some form of sugar. So I make my own dressings. That goes on the BAMO salad. All right, now green listed vegetables, examples would be like zucchini, yellow squash, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, chayote squash, and even okra. And artichokes. Now, okra and artichokes, they have a little bit more carbs in them, right? So if you have a compelling reason to be in this lifestyle, you're going to want to play with those a little bit. You know, if you like baked okra, and we have some great recipes on our YouTube site, Dr. Pete's Keto Club. You don't want to just load the plate up. Right? You want to start out going easy with a vegetable like that. And this is something that if I was new to this lifestyle, I'd be looking at my blood glucose before eating them and then post-meal to see what's going on with that. And then using chemistry language, I would titrate up, meaning that on the next meal, I would have some more of it. And what I'm looking for is seeing how much of it I can have and have my blood glucose post-meal blood glucose still leveled out. And that's how I've done things now for the last couple of years, right? The fats, the good fats that you're going to be eating are going to be the natural ones that are not refined. That means we want to ditch the vegetable oils, the canola, the soybean, the flaxseed, all that stuff. Just walk, turn around and walk away. So the oils that I'm talking about eating are olive oil, avocado oil, ghee, butter, beef tallow, bacon grease. And one of the things that happens in this lifestyle, the longer you're in it, is you develop new cravings. And one of my cravings is actually coconut oil. And that's my dessert. You know, I have a craving for it. And after I've had my meal, instead of running to the chocolate bar that I used to eat, now right after the meal, I'll usually go and get a couple tablespoons of coconut oil. And that's my go-to. In terms of cravings, the other craving that I have now is for salt. It's interesting how things change with time. Okay, and then meal timing. Meal timing is going to matter. One of the problems in this lifestyle when you start it is that most people are used to eating all day long. The carboholics are used to eating all day long, and they don't even realize they're doing it, right? Because they start their breakfast with quite often I've seen this with this massive bowl of oatmeal that's loaded with all kinds of high carbohydrate fruit. And I actually did a calculation on this that I talked about last time. They're having a breakfast meal that's somewhere between 90 to 100 grams of carbs easily. Bammo. And then what happens with that, because of the high insulin expression, which disrupts the hunger and satiation hormones, is that they're hungry an hour later, maybe. And you know, if it was like me in my teaching career before I left it, they're looking for their first class break. Where do they head? To the break room? What are they going to find? Bagels and chips and cupcakes, you know, the birthday cake from yesterday afternoon. And what do? They hit that stuff, right? And then lunch is going to be like about an hour later. So what's my point here? You're moving from a carboholic lifestyle, where you're eating 5 or 6 times a day, to this lifestyle where very rapidly you're going to be evolving to eat fewer meals. Somewhere I'm only eating 2 meals a day at this point. And my eating window, which matters, is between 10 to 12 each day. That was a natural evolution that happened to me. And then I try really hard to finish my evening meal before 6 in the evening, because I do not want any adverse insulin expression going on before I go to sleep, right? So I want to make sure to finish my dinner by 6 in the evening. That gives me plenty of time before I'm actually ready to go to sleep. And the other thing that this does, there could even be questions in the Clubhouse room or maybe on YouTube today about intermittent fasting. And when I'm asked about that, usually what I say is that get keto adapted first. This is 2 to 3 months of being in the keto lifestyle carefully, making sure your ketones are between 0.5 to 3 millimolar every day. You're not doing excursions out, right, back into the carbohydrate life and bouncing in and out. And because in that time frame, you will evolve to eating fewer times every day. And if you're paying attention to the eating window, you will naturally be fasting. So like I finished eating at 6 in the evening, and my next meal is not until between 10 to 12. And you can see right there, I have a really nice fasting window. That is a natural part of this lifestyle. And then if you want to do more of it, get Jason Fung's books, really read up on it. And then you can start playing around with that. If you do it the way I'm talking about, you're going to have ketones much faster, right? I mean, these people talk about, all right, I'm doing intermittent fasting. My ketones are not really rising until I've heard things in Clubhouse 2 to 3 days. If you're keto adapted, my ketones are 3 millimolar in the late afternoon. And if I decide I'm going to fast for 24 hours, I can already tell you where those babies are going to be sitting, right? I don't have to wait a long period of time for that business to get going. My ketones this morning, by the way, when I measured them, were 1.1 right out of bed. All right. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about quickly are the electrolytes. You want to be between 10 to 12 grams of table salt. The type of table salt you choose, that's up to you. A lot of people want to do the Himalayan salt, whatever. That's fine. I don't want to get into a nitty picky here about, what it should be, but I want to talk about the 10 to 12 grams because a lot of people have a knee-jerk reaction to that, and they'll go, holy crap, that is way too much salt to be eating, because my doctor says that nya, right? Okay, so here's the thing that you need to understand. There's been some really seriously high quality science done in this area, and where the number 10 to 12 grams of table salt comes from, firstly, is understanding that table salt is composed of sodium and chloride together. And the sodium is 50% by mass of the table salt. So 10 to 12 grams of table salt is actually between 4 to 6 grams, essentially between 4 to 6 grams of sodium. And when you look at the literature, all-cause mortality is lowest for somebody who's eating sodium between 4 to 6 grams. And I tend to center myself right in that interval between, I'm having between 5 to 6 grams of sodium per day. As a side to that, the sodium that the medical establishment is telling you should be eating is significantly less than that. It's around 2 to 3 grams of sodium per day. And all-cause mortality for somebody eating that sodium is higher than all-cause mortality for somebody who's eating in the range that I'm recommending. Why am I going on about the electrolyte or the table salt? Because coming up short on that is one of the main reasons why people feel crappy going into this lifestyle literally 2 or 3 days into it. So managing the electrolytes right out of the gate is super important. You should start eating more sodium going into the lifestyle, and be prepared that if you suddenly feel rapid onset fatigue, dizziness, nausea, and so on, a sip of some high salt chicken broth, or in my case, I'll just take a little bit or what I did in the early days was take a little bit of salt, put it in some water, mix it up, and drink that. Nowadays, it's part of my diet, right? I'm taking care of this from the word go. I have coffee in the morning that has salt in it. I put salt in it. I've now have a craving for it. If I don't have salt in my coffee, it just doesn't taste right to me. Was it that way in the beginning? No, right? This is something, cravings happen over time. Lastly, things to avoid. The number one thing is the replacement phenomenon. And again, this circles way back to the beginning of our conversation. If you're not honest with yourself about your level of carb intake over the course of a day, one of the big problems that I see people have going into this is they start thinking, all right, I can't have sugar in my coffee anymore, so what can I do? Oh, I'm going to have the erythritol or the monk sugar or yanya. And this should be avoided. Why? Because there's more and more science that indicates that there's an insulin response using these not non-sugar, I'm using this term lightly or loosely, substitutes, and also they light up the same part of your brain that sugar does. And so you basically can be setting yourself up for not being able to say no to the cravings and then go back to eating the carbs. One of the hidden things I've seen with my clients quite frequently is smoothies and the protein drinks. They usually don't tell me that they eat these every day, and then we get into the lifestyle and we've got issues right out of the gate. And then as I interview, I find out that they're doing this. This can be a very bad habit because they can have a ton of carbs in them. So this is something that you've got to look at very critically and make sure that you're not doing that to yourself, because you won't be able to get into ketosis and stay there. And then lastly, people that really like the bagels and the baked goods and the pancakes, this goes back to the replacement phenomenon, right? So they run out and they get the almond flour and they get the flaxseed flour and they get this flour and that flour, and they start eating these baked goods, and then they're having problems losing weight, and they're having problems staying in ketosis and reversing diabetes. Why? Because even though those flours have less carbs in them, they still have a lot of carbs. And I would suggest that if you're really thinking about that you wait and get keto adapted. And then, like I spoke about the okra, you handle things carefully. You try a little bit and you monitor ketones and blood glucose, and you see what's happening when you eat that stuff, and then make an educated decision about whether you're going to keep going. All right. So I've talked enough, and I want to make sure to welcome everyone who's here. If you have any questions, we're now going to open this up completely. Any questions, comments, whatever you want to get into, I invite everyone. The dirtier we get here, let's mix it up and have a conversation about the keto. And yeah, okay. So with that, I'm going to quiet down. Nathan, do you have some things you want to get into now? Anyone in Clubhouse want to come up, join us here? Any questions or comments? Okay, I have some comments coming in on YouTube. Let me just, okay. It's never too late to get healthy. Keto and intermittent fasting go hand in hand because you reach satiety and your hunger stops. So true, fasting becomes natural. Thanks a lot, Grisella Norris, for that comment. I really, really appreciate it. Nathan, are you with me yet?
Sorry, I'm in the middle of something. Yeah, sorry.
Anyone else want to come up and jump in on this discussion? Any questions? Okay, then what I'm going to do, oh wait, we do have someone coming up. Awesome. Ravi, good morning. Thank you for coming up. What do you got for us?
No, basically a little bit of a discussion on the process of what I see as a difficulty in patients that do come to see me for this whole problem. And I see that there is a huge issue with self-awareness and addiction as a major problem. And trying to get them out of that is like a huge step towards them understanding their own addiction. And I try to be as compassionate as possible, as diligent as possible to educate them, but sometimes it's very hard. And what are the approaches you take if you do any counseling for those kind of patients to encourage them to be compliant or understand their own metabolic health problems? I mean, like, I do all the waste to height ratios that you talked about. I do the lipid profile, and I mean, like, I even give them a food tracking tool that they are able to track their food and log it, and I even give them feedback. So they do fall off the wagon, but I have had good success, but I want to see how I can improve upon patient awareness. What are the tricks that you follow to make them aware of their own problems?
That's a really, I mean, okay, so what Dr. Ravi is talking about here is, as far as I'm concerned, is the main crux or hardest part of this lifestyle. And especially if you are somebody who's trying to reverse a chronic disease, all right? And I have clients that are struggling with this, and I wish I had an answer for this, because addiction issues they're not solved easily at all. And I know me sitting here, there's always the risk of me saying, well, I think this or I think that. And not being a carb addict myself, I can't really speak to that. What I can speak to, though, is that when I became pre-diabetic, I was eating refined carbs in a lot of respects over the course of the day. Like I made Thai food regularly, right? And that was always loaded. I especially liked the white rice, just because of the way it cooked and the texture and whatnot. That was really bad for me, right? The other thing is I used to have 3 beers while I cooked dinner every single night. So I'm just going to admit to this audience right now that I had an addiction to the alcohol, and I still struggle with that now. I'm not going to lie. So from that point of view, I can see where the carb addiction thing is not easy. Just, one thing I try to do is keep my favorite beer out of the house. We talked about this a little bit earlier, right? The situation with cleaning the pantry out, right? It refers to any of the foods that you prefer. So I try to keep the alcohol out of the house. But my wife drinks, right? She's just occasionally, right? Didn't have an addiction thing with it, or doesn't. So again, I don't seem to have a problem with what she has in the house, but I keep out of the house what I have a problem with. So again, I think in terms of addiction, that the support network and keeping things out of the house, that you're going to go to, are super important. Because I know with at least one of the clients that I have, if they're having a really rough day and they get home and there's pizza in the refrigerator, there's and other items that are like that the kids are eating, that they're going to go for that, especially if the day has really been super rough, right? They had a lot of stress during the day. They didn't have time to really get any time to themselves. They're super exhausted, right? And then I know for me that my biggest alcohol cravings are in the late afternoon, when the entire day has started to collapse, right? I've been doing this since 5 a.m. I'm with you guys right now. I've been at it since 5 a.m. When I'm done with this today, I'm going to go right back to work in this area, and it's going to go on all day long. If I have a particularly rough day and I don't eat adequately, all these factors can collapse into a major pressure of cravings. And I think that's when we're most vulnerable. So finding strategies to limit that time frame and to push back on those urges, in my view, are the best strategies. Yeah, Pete, what do you got for us?
Hey, Dr. Pete, thanks again for putting on a great program here for us. So just, I guess I wanted to share a little bit about my experience. I have been in a ketogenic diet for only a little bit over 6 months, perhaps, or 6 months now. You and I know each other. You've seen my lipids. You've seen my improvement over the months. And I just wanted to share that, yes, the carb addiction is a tough thing. I'm addicted to, or maybe I should say I was addicted to sweets. I find myself now at a point where I, struggle in the beginning. The first month or two was hard. I too looked for the almond flours and all of those things, the substitutes. I can say that maybe it did help a little bit, but I don't think that was the way to go, because I did have a bunch of pitfalls here and there. So, when I, got into the keto, quote unquote, keto muffins and all of that, you do tend to, you may think it helps you a little bit, but, in my experience was that I thought it was helping me, but it also led me down a pitfall a couple of times. So perhaps avoiding those, I think, might be the best way to do. But it does take someone. Talk about addiction and how to break that addiction. Unfortunately, in my case, and I see for many people now, breaking that addiction sometimes takes for lack of better words, a meaningful event in your life. I struggled with cholesterol for a while. I knew that my cholesterol was in bad shape or was getting worse over the years. My weight was getting worse over the years. And, in the back of your mind, we're smart enough to know, hey, you think you're healthy, but you're not healthy. And so, the warnings from the doctor, watch your cholesterol and all of that. Unfortunately, they never told me, change your lifestyle and your diet. I came to find that out by myself. But my lipids and my gout attacks were getting worse and all of that. But I continued to have my pint of ice cream at night. I've always been a stress eater. But what really broke it to me, I guess, for lack of better words, was finally having, and I say finally because that's what made me change, was my calcium score of 186. I went for a calcium score of and I got a result of 186, and basically drove home crying and sobbing like a baby, thinking, well, I'm about to die. And ever since then, a light went off in my brain. I changed into a keto diet. I lost 68 pounds in the last, I lost 68 pounds in 5.5 months in the ketogenic diet. The first month was a little bit, first month or two, I confess I did look into the almond substitutes, the sugar substitutes, all of that stuff. And then as I started seeing improvement and I got over the hill per se, with the carbs and all of that, and I found myself, in ketosis, and I started losing the weight. I started getting more and more motivated. I cleaned up my diet, and I definitely started then seeing my lipids improve tremendously. I've shared some of my lipids with you, Dr. Pete, so you've seen some of them. I just did lipids again this past week, and I'm proud to say that I went from the last time we spoke, I was still insulin impaired, or impaired insulin, because I was at the score of 44. I'm now proud to share that I'm my insulin resistance score is 13, which puts me in according to these tests, in the insulin sensitive. And so when you start seeing improvements like that, that should also motivate you to see that, well, lifestyle change and your ketogenic diet is definitely improving. And the most rewarding part is to go back to your doctor and say, so doctor, do you think I still need the statins? No, absolutely not. Your diet is you're doing all you can do to improve your life, he says to me. And then knowing that I was pre-diabetic at 230 pounds 6 months ago, my next question, so do you think I'm still pre-diabetic? And absolutely not. So all of those things are very rewarding. So you got to look at that as a reward. But when I say I became very, very picky about my ketogenic diet and eliminated all sugars, all substitutes, cook at home. If I had to eat out, I was very, very careful to really dissect the menu and see what I could eat. And if they could adapt that menu to my diet, fine. If not, I got up and went somewhere else to eat. I just wanted to share that a little bit. I hope it helps, but it is doable. And once you start seeing the improvements, that ought to motivate you too. I'm 68 pounds lighter now. I feel great. And a lot of the pains and aches are gone. And just a peace of mind that you're doing everything that you can really to be healthier. And as a father of 3 boys, that gives me a little hope that, I can hopefully be scaling some rocks as I've seen you do, Dr. Pete. And by the way, you look amazing. I can only hope that I can get to that level. And I'm younger than you are. I'm 51 years old. But anyway, thank you for doing this for us, and let's keep up the good work here.
Thanks for your contribution, Pete. I really appreciate it. And the fact that you're openly talking about numbers, then I want the audience to know that I just redid my numbers, and I'm going to do a separate YouTube presentation for that. But ditto to everything that you said. I mean, over the last almost 3 years now, I've seen my numbers shift. Some things happen fast. The A1C, the fasting glucose, stabilizes very quickly. My A1C now is 5.0. The lipid profile for me took longer. It was over a year before I saw, but I've been tracking these numbers religiously, and my lipid profile looks beautiful at this point. My HDL is up. This is just like the published literature, especially out of Verta Health, says the HDL is up. The triglycerides are way down. My LDL is up a little bit, but there's no worries there as far as I'm concerned. You can go to the cholesterol code and you can plug in all your numbers there and get analysis. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at the biomarkers. I listed them all off a little bit earlier. I don't want to do that again and get tracked out of this discussion right now. I have a question coming in from YouTube. And that question is, where do you see exercise with starting keto the first weeks for those who are severely carb addicted? I've heard both ways, taking it easy or pushing harder. And so I want to address that question. A lot of this is going to depend on when you start the keto lifestyle, how deep you go out of the gate. And because this is going to matter. And I'll try to explain quickly about this. When I started this, like I said, I believe in rigorously monitoring biomarkers. So I was measuring my fasting glucose, my ketones, blood pressure, and my weight every single day. And in the beginning, many times over the course of the day, in between and after meals, and you name it, because I wanted to understand what was going on with me. And I have stuck to 50 grams of total carbs per day for the last almost 3 years now. Now, for somebody who's going deep into this lifestyle and holding ground, in the beginning, the exercise can feel really bad. And why is that? Because you have not keto adapted yet. What does that mean? It means that you're a sugar burner, and for exercise, you're relying on your glycogen stores, which get depleted. If you're a fifth-year CrossFit athlete like I was, and you're working out 5 days a week, let me tell you, I couldn't do that in the beginning. I got my butt kicked a couple of days into that, and for a couple of months, I had to take that kind of extreme exercise carefully, right? I could not do it every day. And instead, what I did was I started going for long walks and things that weren't like, punching my ticket. And over the course of a couple of months, what I saw happen was, as I keto adapted, that changed. And now for the last 3 years, I recover faster. I don't hit that wall that we're talking about here. When you first start a HIIT exercise in the first days of keto, stuff like that was super hard, right? But I don't have that issue now. And if I want to work out every day, I can. And like I said, I'm moving into the climbing season right now. So I'm not hitting every day. And I'm not doing strength training every day. I'm in top shape, and I'm into the climbing season, and I have, recovery coming into that. Now, one other thing I want to say about this is if you're bouncing in and out of ketosis, because in Nick's question here, he's asking about people that are carb addicted. So if you're bouncing in and out of ketosis, then I'm thinking the exercise is not going to be feeling good, because for one thing, your body's going to be biochemically confused. And I honestly think, and this comes back to one of the main premises of the last 4 sessions, that carb addiction is the big barrier to actually being successful in this lifestyle. So finding a way to get into ketosis and staying there long enough to keto adapt, I think, is going to be important for those of us who are athletic and want to live that existence, right, and feel good doing it. So I think riding in and out of the ketosis thing and trying to exercise with regularity and in terms of intensity is going to be hard. I think it's going to be super hard. But anyway, this is Dr. Pete. I've gone on long enough. I see Dr. Nick has joined us. Dr. Nick, do you have a comment or something you would like to add or whatever you'd like to say?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Pete. I wanted to, I'll first address that question because I think it's quite a good one. And then I just wanted to backtrack about something you said about cholesterol code, because I'm working quite closely with Dave Feldman with respect to all that and the metabolic markers. With respect to exercise, I would say I'd pose the question to the individual who posed the question, or any individual asking this question: what is the goal of your exercise? Are you doing exercise to lose weight, which a lot of people are? In that case, I would say, honestly, don't worry about it. We know that, the eat less, move more strategy does not work long term. And so why overburden yourself and overburden your body at a point in time when you're trying to transition to a low-carb diet? I think a little bit of movement is fine, but I would discourage people from doing a lot of cardiovascular exercise with the goal of weight loss, which a lot of people do. So like trying to go on, the treadmill for an hour while transitioning to low carb. If you're going to do exercise, and I think exercise is fantastic for metabolic health, what I would say is while you're transitioning, focus on strength training exercises, resistance training, weight training, for a couple reasons. One, first of all, that should be part of your program anyway. I think, especially as we age, it's important to mind our muscle mass, our lean mass, which you can do by exercise and weight training, but also it requires a little bit less of you in terms of just little concerted bursts. So, like, you could incorporate into your routine, you're going to do 10 push-ups 3 times a day, depending on, what you're doing. That will, 1, help target glucose to your muscles, which you want. 2, help you maintain muscle mass while losing weight, which is really critical because if you're on a ketogenic diet and you're losing weight rapidly, you might lose some muscle mass. In fact, in the first 3 weeks, there's an adaptation of nitrogen homeostasis, which basically means in the first 3 weeks, you might lose a little muscle. So weight training, resistance training can help offset that. So your body composition is better at the end. Plus, trials show that just adding on aerobic exercise to low carb does not improve weight loss. So if you're going to exercise, I would say focus on strength training. It'll be easier to do. It'll help you metabolically adapt, and you'll end up in a better place in terms of body comp. And then you can add in aerobic once you feel up to it. Your body should want to do exercise if you're metabolically healthy. I mean, nutrition is foundational to being able to do things like move your body, or to be able to want to move your body. If you're just forcing it all the time, chances are there are other adaptations going on in your body that are maybe not what you want to happen. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted if I'm rambling a bit, just driving. But the other thing I wanted to say briefly while I'm here, with respect to Dave Feldman and cholesterol code, Dr. Pete, for those who don't know, is referring to what's called the lipid energy model, and this phenotype of relatively lean individuals having a spike in LDL, an increase in LDL, while their other cardiovascular risk markers all improved. And it's been hypothesized that this spike in LDL might not be a bad outcome in this population. I think I'm cautiously optimistic that that's the case. And I'm one of those cohort, and I'm unmedicated. What I just want to say on the record, just because I think Dave is misunderstood, and myself as well, with respect to our feelings on LDL, is that this is such an important thing to study because we are not convinced that it is harmful. Even to have LDLs above 200 or 300, in this population, we don't know that it's harmful, but we also don't know that it's not. So I I guess what I'm saying is we don't know that really high LDLs on keto aren't bad. A lot of people think that they are. I don't personally think that they are, but right now we don't have those data. And so what the really interesting thing about this model and this group of people is that it's kind of breaking the rule as we see it to, how LDL levels go up and down and what other things go up and down with them. It's just a lot of confusion in the field right now. So I wanted to almost introduce more confusion to prime you for the fact that I actually tend to agree with Dr. Pete myself. You're going to hear other things from other people about stuff like LDL, and the thing to know is it's not a settled debate, but that we actually really need to answer these questions. And unfortunately, some people want to turn away from the question of, is, say, high LDL harmful in people on a ketogenic diet who have great metabolic markers otherwise? So really high HDL and low triglycerides. So if I were you, just to make it very brief, I would say if you go on a low carb diet and you're monitoring your lipid levels, I think the most important thing to focus on is, are your triglycerides low and your HDL high? Because if they aren't, then LDL we know is going to be problematic. So we're going over some data, and there are people who go on a low carb diet and their LDL goes high, but their triglycerides and HDL are also awful. And that's problematic, and we know that for a fact. So I'm done speaking. Sorry if this is a little rambling again. I'm a bit distracted, but I wanted to say those two things, and I'll hand it back to you, Dr. Pete.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Dr. Nick, I really appreciate actually what you said. And I don't really find it rambling. I'm trying to do this session in a way that, right now that, without getting too far into some of the details, but what I love about your point has to do with the fact that if you're the common person on the street, right, and this is where I was 3 years ago, and then you've got this diagnosis that you're pre-diabetic or you're type 2 or your cardiovascular system is a mess and you need a stent. This is like right out of the gate, right? And one of the frustrations that I've had with the medical establishment is their propensity to only care about single points. And you guys will see where I'm going with this in a second. And what do I mean by a single point? I mean, when I had my bloods done 3 years ago, my HDL was 39, right? And the doctor looks at that value and goes, well, yeah, that number's a little low, but hey, don't worry about it, right? Just continue on with your lifestyle, which I was, and make sure to eat a more rigorous Mediterranean diet and exercise 5 days a week. All right. So one of the things, and we all know, I think that everyone here understands that this kind of advice is really an issue, because had I done that, I probably would be type 2 at this point, and maybe injecting insulin. Who knows, right? I don't know what the future, if I'd gone that route, would be looking like. But I know that I didn't want to go there, and I'm not going there. So for me, as a health coach and a biochemist, I have been pondering a lot. What do we need to measure, right? And I visited Dr. Nick and Dave Feldman in the rooms that they offer, which if you guys all have a chance to get there, you need to do it. And I think it's so important for us to all really be discussing this. And what I like about Feldman and Dr. Nick the best is the fact that they are asking really hard questions and they admit what we don't know. And this is something that I'm pushing on. And earlier today, I mentioned the biomarkers that I now have done in my bloods, because I for one, as a group, and looking out in this room and on YouTube right now, want to find a collection of biomarkers that we can look at as a starting point to say something about our metabolic health that's far more meaningful than looking at a single marker and saying, oh, well, you have a problem or you don't have a problem. Like if your fasting glucose is high and your doctor goes, well, this is high. Oh, but don't worry about it. Well, should you worry about it? Maybe not. Maybe you just had a strange morning. On the other hand, why the hell didn't that doctor ask for the A1C? And why didn't they do a lipid panel in that annual physical exam that's more extensive than just being concerned about the cholesterol? And why the hell didn't they ask for a high sensitivity CRP? And what about ApoA and ApoB? And what about the homocysteine, right? What about those things? And I know that, and maybe we should have this discussion right now. You could argue about the points that I've chosen to look at rigorously. But the thing is, I think that we need to have the conversation, and we need to decide on some kind of entry point platform, because there's so many people out there who are going to go to the doctor this year and get a diagnosis that's going to be based on 1 or 2 points, right? 1 or 2 points in their blood work. And then they're shuttled out the door in 15 minutes. And just what are they supposed to do with that information, which, based on 1 or 2 points, can be completely flawed? And so, I've taken it on myself to decide on these markers, but I think as a community we should decide on the markers. And I'm happy as hell that guys like Dave Feldman are out there with Cholesterol Code trying to hammer away and understand the lipidology of this, because it's so super important and it has been so neglected. But anyway, I'm now can be accused of ranting, so I'm going to quiet down and open the floor up again.
I just want to reply quickly. I only have a couple more minutes, but to just speak with maybe a little bit more clarity now that I'm done driving on why I came to the stage and reinforcing what you said. So the first thing, the reason I came to the stage was almost because we get in trouble. We being, say, me or Dave Feldman or even you, Dr. P, could, in theory, not legal trouble, but people misinterpret what we're saying as you don't have to care at all about your LDL, which is not what we're saying. Rather, what we're saying, and this is a fine distinction, but is exactly what Dr. Pete said, that LDL is part of a constellation of markers, and you need to look at it in that context. So when people go on a low-carb diet, and in particular those people that Dave Feldman describes, the lean mass hyper-responders, LDL is the isolated metric that tends to go up, which is interesting because all the other cardiovascular risk markers improve. Generally, people lose, visceral fat, their blood pressure goes down, their glucose and insulin resistance scores improve, their HDL goes up, the triglycerides go down, and things like small, dense LDL on advanced lipid testing, which is actually the most atherogenic form of LDL, go down, which is really weird. This has been shown in controlled trials that even when in kind of lean athletic people, LDL goes up on a low-carb diet, small, dense LDL, the subpopulation we might care about more, goes down. So people don't tend to think and ask those questions. Rather, there are particular cutoff points, like LDL of 190 milligrams per deciliter, that if it's above that, you get a statin. That's the formula. It's very algorithmic. And in part, that's not the fault of the doctors, because they could get in trouble for not adhering to guidelines, which say, if a patient has an LDL above 190, they have to go on a statin, period, end of story. Which is unfortunate because, again, we don't know. In fact, if you look at people who are, hyper-responders, and you look at, say, lean mass hyper-responders and that triglyceride to HDL ratio, and all the people who are hyper-responders, if you then combine the two groups, the lean mass hyper-responders just completely disappear, as in the overall aggregate is much more similar to that more typical non-hyper-responder group. So the question is, really, are you throwing the baby out with the bathwater in treating people based on isolated markers like that? And also, this is literally the last thing I'll add is, if it were all the same, I will tell you myself as a lean mass hyper-responder, if it were all the same, I would lower at least my ApoB. Like, if I could just snap my fingers and be like, oh, I don't want my LDL at 500, 600, 300, whatever. I can just snap my fingers and nothing else will change. I'll just bring it down. I think that's actually, given where we are right now with the literature, the more conservative approach. Because in this population, I would argue we don't know. Other people would argue that we, have more evidence suggesting that's the case, but I would argue we don't know. And then it becomes a question of, all right, with any medication or any intervention, even if it's dietary, there are pros and cons, risks and benefits, including for statins. A drug called Zetia, I think it maybe has a more favorable profile. It just decreases cholesterol absorption in your gut, which helps do other things like increase LDL receptors. But that, or coming off a low carb diet or going from ketogenic to low carb can drastically drop your LDL if you're a hyper responder. I've seen it as much as almost 500 milligrams per deciliter drop by just including basically the equivalent of a sweet potato per day. So think about that for a second, just a sidebar. That in some people, about a sweet potato added to your diet per day can drop your LDL as much as, 10 statins on top of each other? It's kind of crazy, the biology. But anyway, these things all have pros and cons, and I think, my opinion as a patient, because I don't think anybody in this room is actually a clinical MD. I'm a PhD scientist. I'm doing medical training, but I'm a PhD scientist. I think so is Dr. P. And Dave Feldman's also not an MD, so I want to make that clear. But, I think it should be more of a conversation between the physician and the patient about, does this make sense for me? What are the pros of this intervention? What are the cons? And, do I want to make that trade at this given time in me? And I think coming to it with that perspective will allow us to have more productive conversations between physicians and patients, because right now, what I see happening from a 50,000 foot view is we're pushing to ask these questions, and people are interpreting that as, quote, cholesterol denying. So then patients go to their doctor and say, oh, we found this guy Dave Feldman on the internet, and he says, don't worry about your LDL, and don't take a statin, which he never says. And that just, unfortunately, that leads to contention within the low-carb community, contention between patients and physicians. Physicians then paint the low-carb community with a negative brush, and it discredits us who are really trying to advance the science and ask the questions. Because if our names are out there with a stamp of, a negative stamp on them, then when you try to publish a paper, people might recognize the name and then just want to shoot down the paper. So just be careful about how you communicate these issues. Not you, Dr. Pete, I'm just saying to in general. Anybody listening, if they go to their doctor, I think the goal here is not to be dogmatic and to really push these honest questions rather than just stick our head in the sand, which is where I think the conventional medical community actually is on this topic. I'm Nick. I'm actually done speaking. I have to go, but thank you for hosting this room, Dr. Pete, and I'm sorry if I made the issues a little bit messy. I just felt I needed to come up and say that.
Sure. Thank you, Nick. This is Dr. Ravi Kamapalli, and I do enjoy a lot of your posts and your rants on YouTube, and I need to thank you for whatever you are putting out there content-wise. And the question is, for me as a medical doctor who is a board-certified infectious disease, wound care, and obesity medicine doctor, the challenge started with my own obesity, and that's when I went down the rabbit hole. In fact, I met Dave and one of those conferences too. And the question just comes down to how we address the problem in healthcare. I think the root cause thinking is lacking. We're taking a problem and trying to solve and simplify a human response. And I think the problem starts with the way in which we approach medical issues. We are trying to say that there is a mass medicine approach and a single solution for every problem, and that's where the root cause of this whole issue with healthcare is. And when it just comes down to lipidology, I mean, even though I was board certified doctor, I really never paid attention to it because we were told to do something and we were going around doing things that we were told. And finally it just dawned on me that we are not on the right path. And once I became board certified in obesity medicine, and I'm seeing the trouble that I am having delivering medical solutions to my patients. And it's not about it's not about one pill that's going to solve a problem, or there is one solution for everybody. And like you say, uniquely, each of us respond to everything that we do differently, and each of our responses are different. So I think that the medical service line has to change dramatically with a personalized approach, and that's where I'm pushing myself in. I'm in Georgia, and I'm working on creating some unique solutions in healthcare. And the only issue is how I have to continue to learn, and I have to learn from people who are out there trying to change things and trying to personalize things. And approaching this with a unique, open mindset is what a healthcare professional or any provider that's calling themselves a doctor has to learn, that there is only so much knowledge they have, and each patient that walks in brings in a different challenge, and how one approaches to that. I mean, like, I think that we are playing the end game of medicine. And to change this end game of medicine, we have to improve our own understanding, one patient at a time, and help them change themselves. Thank you very much. I'm done talking.
Well, Dr. Pete, if I might cut in real fast, I think that we also need to think that, or start somewhere. 6 months ago, most of my lipids were on the red. My A1C was bad. Everything was, borderline high or on the red zone. We'll call it that. And today, all my lipids are on the green except for my LDL, which is a little bit high. But when you go from 6 months ago having an HDL of 18, you mentioned your score, Dr. Pete, so let me add that one. My HDL was 18. My triglycerides was 138 6 months ago. Now my HDL is at 54. My triglycerides are at 72. In 6 months to see all of that improvement. So, when it comes to the LDL aspect of it, I'm okay with it. And that's just me. I'm not a doctor. It's just my personal feeling. When I went from having a lot of red dots on my health screening with my lipids and all of that, and now they're all on the green and they're looking great, except for the LDL. That's the only one that's still a little high. Hey, I'm okay with that.
Thanks for that, Pete. And I know that Dr. Nick's already gone, but thanks for him too. And Ravi, I really appreciated what you had to say about this. And I think the way that a lot of us have gotten here is that we are, I know that I am genuinely interested in trying to answer these questions, right? Because the one thing that I've learned is that I think there are a lot of fingers that are pointing from the establishment at this lifestyle and saying, you guys don't know, you guys, longevity is an open question and you really haven't answered this or that. But we've been going over an hour now, and what I would like to leave the following thought with everyone is that I honestly and unapologetically think that we need to turn around and point the finger the other way, because the establishment does not know anything about this, especially, and I'm talking about the baseline establishment in terms of the longevity of somebody who stays on the standard American diet. You can look at the results yourself in terms of the chronic disease explosion, the fact that over 52% of people my age are pre-diabetic or diabetic. You can go right down the statistics with it. They don't know any more than we do, right, in terms of the long-term effects of this lifestyle, right? Because we have not been hammering the data out that long yet. But what you can say, and we do know this, especially the work coming out of Virta Health, is that our cardiovascular systems improve in this lifestyle. The only thing that goes up is the LDL. And yes, that is an open question. But to get results like Pete did, right, and like I have, to see your HDL essentially right itself, right, it goes up substantially, and the triglycerides go down, right. That is an amazing transition, and you can track it without any problem, along with the other biomarkers that I talk about. And in every single case, in my case, and I'm going to talk about this extensively in the next session that we do, I've seen an improvement in my markers. All right, so I want to leave everyone with that. We've been at this now almost an hour and 20 minutes, so I'm going to close out. I look forward to seeing everyone next week on Monday, 7 a.m. here on Clubhouse, also on YouTube and on Facebook. And I appreciate everyone who jumped up on stage, and the people that made comments on our YouTube channel. Really, really awesome, right? The more we mix up our conversations, the more we learn, right? So thank you everyone for being here, and I'm going to go ahead and close out the room now. Three. All right. Well, whatever. Fuck.